am joined now by Chris Adams, the Democratic Party nominee for Richland County Clerk of Courts. Thank you for being here, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
His opponent, current Clerk of Courts Denise Ruhl, was out of town this week, unable to be here with us. She is a Republican. She was appointed last year to complete an unexpired term, and she's now seeking to retain her seat. She is a Clear Fork High School graduate. She's been in the Clerk of Courts office, I think, 31 years. She did tell me she hopes to keep doing a job that she loves. But right now, let's dive in and learn more about Chris Adams. So Chris, tell us about yourself. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? What are your hobbies, interests? Help us know Chris Adams tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. First, I'd like to thank everybody for receiving me. It's been a very interesting journey in this campaign. I first came to Mansfield in 2010 after receiving a phone call to come down and be a captain in the prison system at Richland Correctional. I have 31 years of law enforcement and corrections experience, and I also worked for the state auditor's office. While at the auditor's office, that's when I first got the thirst for wanting to do more for the community and to really see how I could help in maintaining that everything's kept above board and that everybody was heard. After leaving the auditor's office, I went to Lorain County Sheriff's Department, where I first found out my taste for the political aspect. That year, the levy didn't pass in Lorain County for the sheriffs. And come to find out, a new prison in Lorain County at Lorain Correctional. I was an officer at Lorain Correctional for 8 years and strived to do more in that area. I applied for promotions and was promoted to lieutenant, skipping the rank of sergeant, and went to lieutenant at Ohio's only Supermax prison in Youngstown. Once in Youngstown, I stayed there for 8 years, was commander of the special response team there, did a lot with the local communities there. When you first put an institution into an area, you have to also recruit so many people from that area to work in the department. It's part of the give and take with the department for being in those areas. Got to know a lot of people there, made a lot of friends, and at that time I got called back to Lorain County where I was needed to go to Grafton Correctional. Transferred laterally as lieutenant at Grafton Correctional. The state mental health board had decided that state hospitals were no longer an issue, which put a lot of the mentally ill into the corrections institutes. So the Department of Corrections had to make a policy to govern those inmates with special needs, mental health needs, and each institution was then given a unit for the mentally needy inmates to receive the treatment that they needed. And I also that at Grafton Correctional. And like I said, in 2010, I got the call to come to Mansfield. The reason I got that call, they had a gang problem at Richland Correctional with the heartless felons, and they were having problems with people throwing drugs over the fences. They promoted me to shift captain to take on this task, and I finished up my last 10 years in corrections as shift captain at Richland Correctional, and we did a good job of getting everything straight there, making improvements, and modernizing the institution to keep up with the times as far as the drones coming over and different unseen ways that they were getting the drugs into the institution.
I know when I looked at your background, and I did note when I read through it about all the law enforcement correctional experience, how is that going to translate for you into the clerk of courts role if you win the election? How do those two kind of come together?
Well, out of my 31 years, I was a supervisor for 22 years. You are only as good as the people that work for you. And once I started learning about the clerk of courts and how things were being run, due to vicarious liability, a supervisor is responsible for the actions of those underneath them. So I would bring to the clerk's office, I'm not just sitting behind the desk, but I'm not looking over anyone's shoulder either. I'm going to put people that are conscious and wary of doing the job that they're assigned to do, and don't let complacency take over.
Technology is obviously an ever-changing thing in today's world. When I started as a reporter in 1979, we were still using electric typewriters. Obviously, technology has changed that. I remember going up in the old days to go to the clerk of court's office, digging through giant, musty volumes of stuff with page after page of handwritten documents. Obviously, that's all changed. So how have you adapted to technology in your own work, and what do you know about the technology that they're using in the clerk of court's office today?
Well, like you said, back in the old days when we started, we had files about 7 inches thick, page by page, tediously going through it. But doing it the old-fashioned way back then homed you in to pay more attention to detail. And with the way that technology is here, you have to get it right the first time. There's no room for error, so you have to pay attention to detail. Like the public request for records. The clerk's office is responsible for getting those out to the public once a request is made. But instead of making copies of those papers or letting them actually sit down with the files and overlook the papers, I'd have those records put onto a thumb drive. That way you wouldn't have any discredit to everything being returned to you, everything be above board, open for the public. They could take it, review it at their leisure, and that way we wouldn't have to make paper copies, incur expense for that. One quick thumb drive and you're out the door.
Right. Now, the clerk of courts manages a fairly large staff. I think there's 15 people in the clerk's office at the courthouse, another 11 in the auto title office. You talked a little bit about your management style. How will that translate from managing a correction staff to managing a group of folks working in the clerk's office?
Well, one thing you have to do with any people that you're supervising, you have to be firm, fair, and consistent. There's not going to be any surprises. Everything's going to be above board and out in the open. Having a good working relationship, the people that you supervise aren't going to make you be a supervisor. They will have enough respect for you to do the job that they're assigned. So I mostly count on a good working relationship with my employees.
All right. Chris, think back to your childhood or even your teenage years. What are the primary or the early life events that have helped shape your views of the world today?
Well, I grew up in Elyria in Lorain County. My mother was the president of the Elyria branch NAACP for 25 years. And with her being in the NAACP, she was also very politically savvy. And as a kid, I went to every dinner, every event. It wasn't a question. It was get your coat and let's go. And looking back on that, I appreciate it because it made me able to see what happens in the political world as much as seeing what the needs of different people are, because the NAACP addresses the issues of the advancement of colored people. All people have color, and so all people that need help, they're there for, and that's what I learned by dealing with the NAACP in that aspect.
All right. You're running as a Democrat for a countywide elective office in a county of about 80,000 registered voters. It's a county where registered Republicans outnumber Democrats by about a 4-to-1 margin. What would you want Republicans and the massive group of independents to know about you that they may not know at this point?
The main thing to know about me is in the role of clerk of courts, they're governed by the Ohio Revised Code. Going into this office, I'm like a blank canvas that could be molded and bring about exactly what the clerk's office is supposed to be about. Like I said, firm, fair, and consistent, transparency, and most up-to-date services that will be at my disposal.
Now, you ran for election last year, I believe, as a Madison Township trustee.
Yes.
What did you learn during that campaign that's helped you this time around?
Well, the way I got into running for that trustee office was a barbecue. I had some friends over at the house, born and raised here in Richland County, and they were telling me about their needs, their concerns, and someone needs to do something. And we talked about it. A couple of days later, I was on my way home, and I passed by the Board of Elections. And I turned in, and I'm like, I'm going to be the person that does something about it. Did not know hardly anything about running for any public office. It was trial and error and bumping my head. But when you bump your head, you got to learn something. And running for that office, even though I didn't win, I met a lot of people, I learned a lot, and I came away better for it.
All right. Now, if you were the average voter, and assuming you haven't voted already, because we all know early voting has started, why would you choose yourself over Denise Ruhl on November 5th?
Well, my opponent has 31 years' experience in the court office of Richland County. And every now and then you need some change. You need a different outlook on something. If you ever have had a task that you've been looking at for a while and you have to step back and get a fresh set of eyes on it because you just can't focus on that anymore, I'm trying to be that fresh set of eyes for the county clerk's office.
All right. If your opponent was here, this would be the time I would offer each of you an opportunity to kind of offer a final message to voters. So this is your chance. What do you want to tell voters tonight that I haven't already asked you about? This is your chance.
Well, running for the clerk's office, it's not an office that is specifically deemed a Republican, a Democrat, an independent. It's the person that can do the job. It's the person that looks at the job and will approach it fairly and honestly. I'm sure that my opponent has done her best, but at this time, this year, I think it's time for a change, and the change that's coming is one that I can make.
All right, and that will conclude our first conversation of the night. Many thanks to Chris Adams for joining us tonight, spending time and giving us his thoughts on what he would do if elected as the next Richland County Clerk of Courts.